Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and I hope you're having a great day so far today. I have another ranking / review of another Tales from the Darkside season, and this video is going to be covering Season 3. Now, Season 3 ran 22 episodes, 2 episodes shorter than its predecessors of Season 1 and Season 2, that both had 24 episodes apiece. And off the bat, a lot of my compliments to this season is noticing that with the trimmed out episode count, there seems to be a lot more budget inherently in some of these episodes. The money that would have gone into 2 extra episodes was put here more so than not. The effects and the camera work, for the most part, look like they have been improved, and that is a good sign. But I also want to say this. Season 3 is a sign that things just get better with Tales from the Darkside. Going back to my Season 1 ranking, even to my Season 2 ranking, I said that Season 1 was rough, and I still stand by that. And Season 2 is a bit of a step up from Season 1, but it's also held back by its own issues that kind of put it even. Here, we're starting to hit that zenith of what I've heard this show to be, and I've heard a lot of fans out there say that Season 3 and Season 4 are probably the best seasons overall compared to the first 2. And yeah, I totally see the gravitas to this series now after watching this season. Now, it is a big old scattershot season. That's not to say that Season 3 does not have its own flaws, because it does. And we'll get there when we get there. But in a lot of ways, I think that this is a better version of Season 1. There's a lot more of a balance in stories. There's not a lot of low-budget mindfuckery, confusing stories that Season 1 had. The low-budget episodes here at least were more schlocky in nature, or there was like a retro element thrown in there, or we're kind of revisiting old directing styles from Season 1 that weren't really there in Season 2, which I thought were kind of fun as well. So I think the style kind of exudes itself more here, all over the board. You know, if you're a schlocky horror fan, this season has a lot more of that. And there's also still some like true crime themed stuff. There's some mysteries. There's some supernatural stories. I don't know. It just, this season seems a little more balanced all over the place, and the quality of stories themselves, I guess the stories they were choosing, for the most part, was a bit better, even than Season 2. So off the bat, my hat goes off to the folks that worked on Season 3. They're probably all the same people, but I'm glad to see that the show has improved, and I cannot wait to get into Season 4. At the time of this video, I've already started the first episode, so that will be coming very soon. And just so you know of how I'm numbering these episodes, I do based on release. So this season, Season 3, ran for 22 episodes, which numerically run on the timeline episode 49 through episode 70, and that's what I'll be referring to them as. And onward to Season 4, a lot of people say that there's 90 episodes, which there is, but there's also 2 unaired ones, and then there's a fan-made one that I'm including to make 93 total. So there will be 23 episodes from episodes 71 to 93 in the next review and ranking for this series to kind of wrap it all up. And I'll mention it there too, but that's just how I'm numbering these things, alright? Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the rankings. So there's 22 episodes ranked from worst to best, and there's a scatter shot in this season. Maybe not as consistent as Season 2 was, but the overall approval rating was a lot higher, I would say. Now, that's not to say that there's some episodes in here I think that are some of the worst of the whole show, and we'll get into that in just a sec. But the criteria I like to use from the bottom is genuinely awful. I don't give anything a 0 or anything. I give everything a flat 1, right? So we're going from like that very low rung there. And then the next step up from that is bad. Then there's meh, okay, decent, good, very good, great, and perfect. Now, the running theme seems to be in all these videos. The only category that did not get made in this season was perfect. There was 0 perfect. But, like I said, there's a scatter shot, and majority of these are in the good column. So, I will take that all day, every day. But We got to start somewhere. Now let's get into the ranking. I have 2 awful episodes. Yes, this was the first season to land 2 awfuls. And they're doozies, and they're here for a reason. But without further ado, let's get into it. At number 22, the worst episode of Season 3 is episode 58, Deliver Us from Goodness. This was a story written by Suzette Hayden Elgin. I gave this a 1.25 out of 5, which isn't a flat 1. That's only because it made me laugh in some areas, but this story is absolutely dreadful. This is another one of these political satire stories, reminiscent to a story from Season 1 called If the Shoes Fit. It does not belong in this show. Some people might argue, yeah, it's campy, yeah, it's, kind of fun. The acting's, hammy enough to make it enjoyable. I can see that. But the plot of this is just confusing as shit. And it's also playing on a lot of taboo things at the same time. So essentially, this woman, she does a lot of this good in the world, right? And all these miraculous things just happen. There's a whole scene involving a fucking bucket of fried chicken falling down to a politician. It's bizarre, okay? And in order to prevent these bad things from happening, these good things from happening, she realizes that she has to go and act against the 10 Commandments to get rid of this good curse that she has. It's completely bizarre. It's unique, but the execution of this is painfully awful, okay? It's not fun. It's funny in some places because of how cringe it is. And that's where I'll leave it. A lot of absurd shit. Some people might like it, like I said. It's just not for me. It's the worst one. And at number 21, we have episode 51, The Bitterest Pill. This was a story by Frederick Pohl. I gave this a 1.25 out of 5 stars. Now, The Bitterest Pill, y'all. Let me be honest. This story was one big, old, huge wet fart. It's kind of retreading some former ideas. So, this woman has recently won a Pick 4 lottery contest, whatever. And she's going to be a big old millionaire. But the woman has a husband that's kind of a jerk and a son that is kind of a wise ass. And she also has this guy that's a family friend that wants to try to break her and her husband up, that comes into the story after they acquire this money. And the man wants to talk with her husband about a business proposition about this pill that he made, and it just derails from there. It's a lot of just nothing happening in the story. It's very overacted, very eccentric. It feels like ADHD on screen. And when the story does get going, it just goes down this weird route with no fucking sense of logic. And yeah, it's kind of predictable in some ways too. And it's the whole execution of the episode is just painfully bad. Similarly to Deliver Us from Goodness. I mean, this is just another one that's just absolutely not for me. This is an awful episode. I can understand if some people might get a kick out of it. It sucks to me, though. Alright, at number 20, we're entering the only bad episode of the season, which isn't saying much because there's 2 below it, but this one was pretty bad, too. This was episode 63, My Own Place. This was written by Ted Gershny and Perry Long. And Perry Long actually stars as the lead actor of this episode, by the way. And I gave this story a 1.5 out of 5 stars. This is very reminiscent to a Season 2 episode called Parlor Floorfront, where this is just entering that racist territory, like more blatantly than that one was from Season 2. This episode not only is just kind of bad taste, but it makes no goddamn sense. Not to say that the acting performances weren't good, and there were some moments of intrigue in the episode, but the plot is literally just this. A guy moves into a too good to be true apartment kind of situation, reminiscent to another episode of Season 2, where he thinks he got this apartment of a lifetime. His girlfriend's excited for him, but he didn't know that he has a roommate living in the apartment with him, and this roommate never gets fucking explained. He's an Indian man, and the guy, the main character, he's a white man, telling him, hey man, you need to move back to Calcutta and stuff like that. That's what he's saying in this episode. It's incredibly just not my speed. It's kind of offensive, honestly. But aside from that, the plot of the story just meanders and meanders, and the guy does these progressively weird things with his roommate, and there's kind of a mindfucky ending to it all that makes no goddamn sense. And there might be some reincarnation hints in there, hinting at the Hindu religion. I don't know. Not my speed. It's very bad, in like bad taste kind of way. Yeah, it sucks. But it's not the worst in this season. It's not the worst, though. Alright, at number 19, we're entering the only meh episode. This was episode 67, The Social Climber. This was a story by Ellen Sandhouse. I gave this episode a 2.25 out of 5. Alright, this one started off with with a good premise. This man works at this shoe store with this older gentleman who may or may not have the ability to strike luck into shoes. And throughout the episode, the guy is kind of struggling with, working a job that he just doesn't see himself doing for the rest of his life, even though he has a girlfriend, even though he has some stability. He's just constantly wanting more. But when you get to a certain point of the episode, you realize that it's just kind of wheel turning going on. There's not a lot happening. The plot never really progresses. The guy just contemplates taking shoes that he's made for other clients, and there's no context built with that. And then the ending, I guess, is supposed to hint back to something that's, I don't want to spoil it, but said about these shoes and how they may operate. It's very vague and nothing makes fucking sense. And not a lot happens in this episode. It's just very boring. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's just a very meh episode. Alright. At number 18, this is the only okay episode as well. So we're in, one of each going on here. But this was the last episode of the season. It was episode 70, The Enormous Radio. This was a story by John Cheever. I gave this a 2.75 out of 5 stars. This one had a more drama element to it. It's not my speed whatsoever, but it was set in the past, back when there was just radios for entertainment. This housewife is given a giant radio by her affluent husband, but the radio might have powers that can, eavesdrop on fellow people in their apartment complex, and the girl gets wrapped up in all this drama on the radio, and yeah, that's about it. It kind of goes into their marriage and their relationship, and it kind of affects her and all that, but not a lot happens in this episode. It's just nothing happening. It's just senseless drama of her listening to this radio. There's nothing scary about it. There's nothing bizarre. It's never even explained how this works. Yeah. It's an okay episode, though. It had some good acting. It had some thought-provoking things involving the relationship of the couple. But other than that, it's okay. I've seen worse, though. I give it a step up from the other okays. I put in the similar category only because of the acting, though. Alright, now we're entering the decent territory. I have 3 episodes here. So at number 17 overall, it's episode 55, Heretic. This was a story by Edith Swenson, who I think is, at this point of the show, like the main writer. She's written easily the most so far, next to Michael McDowell. And this was definitely one of her weaker ones, in my opinion. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Now, this one was kind of a religious story. This man, he's an art collector, and he has recruited this guy to take his money and go find this very rare painting, and it gets shipped to him. And the painting is of like this like Christian monk in a scene on this painting with like the devil holding a man. And he thinks it's like one of the best art pieces he's ever come across in his life. But throughout the episode, he ends up meeting a character possibly from the painting, and it's never really elaborated on too much of what this man is trying to do, except save him from doing a bad choice of keeping the painting and whatnot. And yeah, it has a moral to it, but there's not a lot going on. It's not very scary. And the ending, it's completely random. It's a twist for the sake of a twist, and I think it kind of brings down the episode. I would have put it in actual bottom good if it sent the episode off in a good way, but it just didn't do it. So it's at the bottom of decent. At number 16, we have episode 66, old acquaintances. This was another Edith Swenson story. I gave this a 3.25 out of 5 stars. Now, this one was slightly better, but then again, not a lot going on. It's more of a character study type of episode. Now, not to say that the actors didn't do a good job. The two main ladies who play witches in this story were really fun. And the setup is pretty much this older witch wants this charm from this younger witch, and they have history going back 300 years, and it's pretty much entirely told as a flashback story about how these two met, how the younger one ended up taking her pendant, and what's going on in present day. That's essentially the story in a nutshell. And there's not a lot of stuff going on, and the twist ending, what happens to one of the characters is kind of goofy. It could have been better. There could have been more horror. There was an actual death sequence where this character says that they died and they got to meet all these characters in this other dimension, but we never got to see any of that. A lot of off-page stuff is happening here. Not a big fan of that kind of storytelling. It's not for me, but decent enough. All right. And at number 15, the last of the decents, we have episode 61, The Milkman Cometh. This was a story by Charles L. Grant, and I also gave this one a 3.25 out of 5 stars. This one had so much potential. It started out very creepy and actually had some creepy moments throughout the episode, but it kind of ended up in the wet fart territory. So the premise and the idea behind this is this family who's kind of like financially struggling here, they have a son who understands this legend going around town that if you leave a note out on your door, the milkman, because back in the day, milkmen used to come and deliver milk to houses. Yeah, I've never experienced that in my life, but I've seen it in a lot of older storytelling here. If you leave a note of what you want, the milkman will bring it to you. But the catch is, you can never see the milkman. If you see the milkman, he'll run away, and you can't do it. And the only way to bribe him to come back is if you leave like a box of candy out for him to snack on. Now, throughout the episode, it is kind of creepy with shots of this milkman coming to this family's house. You don't know like what kind of being it is, but it's implied to be maybe an alien. Yeah, that's pretty much, and the twist kind of goes down that route too, of something that happens to one of the characters. It's very weird and bizarre. I just think that, sometimes less is more. Showing less kind of creates more tension, and in this case, it does. But I kind of wish that the final act was a whole lot better than what we got. And this episode kind of dragged its ass a good amount of it. We kind of just kept, dragging ourselves to the point where the milkman was finally going to come. Now, that's more of a pacing issue. I might be more forgiving in the future. I might be able to bump this one up to good now that I'm thinking about it. But I'll leave it in decent for now. It's just, it had a lot of just irritating stuff. That's why I put it here, essentially. Alright, so now we're entering the good. Now, there's 9 episodes in this category, so we have a lot to go over. But these were a lot better than the good from Season 2 and Season 1, in my opinion, for the most part. At number 14, we have episode 50, I Can't Help Saying Goodbye. This was a story by Anne McKenzie, and I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This story was very creepy. This girl, she had lost her mom in a bizarre way. Like, she kind of predicted the future by saying goodbye to her. And then she's given up to her older sister, who's an adult, who has a fiance, or soon-to-be fiance, of a man who has asthma. And once this little girl is acquired by this couple, bizarre shit starts happening with her, saying goodbye to people, and some bad shit starts happening to people, and there's a fucked up ending involving the main character, the older sister of the story, and what she has to do with her younger sister. It's very morbid. It's fucked up. I love it in a lot of ways. I actually had this at one point right at a 4 out of 5, but after thinking about it, there's a lot of just forced things in the episode to kind of shoehorn in the idea, which isn't the worst thing ever story-wise. And the execution, they did go a little more of the artsy-fartsy route of kind of showing visuals of how shit was going to happen, and it kind of broke realism from the story. There's a lot of just absurd shit in there that just shouldn't be in there. And the ending there's like 3 different interpretations of the ending, from what I've gathered. I still don't understand what the fuck the ending implies. But it's not very clear, very vague. And thinking about that, maybe put it this low. But it's still a good episode. I enjoyed it. At number 13, we have episode 56, A Serpent's Tooth. This was a story, again, by Edith Swenson. I give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. This story had kind of like a moral of you should listen to your parents. Exaggerated, of course, but it was very hammy, and it was a very memorable acting performance-wise episode. This mom, I guess, who has like an immigrant background, has these 2 older adult children. I think they're both in college. One's a girl, and she likes to dress up like in the typical 80s garb, and she dates like this guy that's going nowhere in his life. And the other kid she has is a guy, and he's supposed to go to dental school, but he's kind of questioning of what he's, trying to do. And there's also another character who's like a neighbor boy that constantly irritates her, and she's always giving these like puns and, silly advice that she thinks makes sense, but they never listen to her until one of her family friends give her a tooth that she wears around her neck, and whatever she says actually comes true. And some things happen to her son, to this boy neighbor, and to her daughter, and even to her daughter's boyfriend, that kind of, make them resent her, and they pretty much force her into her ultimatum. Something may happen with that, and it ends kind of in a weird, fucking artsy-fartsy way. That's really my only negative with the story, honestly, is like the final 5 minutes of it. It just wraps up rather quickly and kind of fucking confusing as shit. And the whole setup and the idea gets kind of wasted away with a story decision in there. But, not the worst thing ever in terms of issues. It's still a great, enjoyable episode for what it is. Just, I like a whole lot more from this season than this. So, that kind of is the reason why I put it here. All right, episode 12. At number 12, we have episode 54. Black Widows. This was, I think, the only story by Michael McDowell in this season. And I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This story was fucking bizarre as shit. This is a creature feature story, but it's so much fun. This mother, who may or may not have this ability to turn into a spider, lives in this trailer park with her daughter. And her daughter just wants to find somebody to love and marry. But this mom may be keeping a secret, maybe a hereditary secret. And throughout the episode, a couple of men end up getting in the ways of these women. And there's some graphic shit, like some really good effects in this episode. Very hokey, though. I think the main reason and the main detractor why I put it this low is how hokey the fucking episode is. Some stuff happens off screen. It's kind of cliche in some elements, borrowing from other stories that I've seen before. Gets kind of predictable, especially a twist with one of the characters. I think the daughter character twist is so predictable, especially by the end. There's just too much put on the plate for people to understand that, hey, this is, there's setup and payoff to it, but there's not a lot to it. I wish that this was a more expansive episode. Maybe if they cut another 2 episodes out of the equation and made it just 20 episodes, they could have upped the budget on this one. But for the most part, still a good episode. At number 11, we have episode 64, Red Leader. This was another Edith Swenson story, and I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. This story should not fucking work whatsoever. It breaks a lot of logic. It's metaphysical in reality and supernatural all thrown together into a blender. Shouldn't work, but it kind of does because it's fucking entertaining as shit. I don't know how to explain it unless you've seen it. But this story is just a guy. He's like a tycoon. He's at this big old business place, and somebody has broken through the gates of hell with a jackhammer through the ground, up through it, and it's one of his old colleagues. And he's looking for evidence to convince Satan, the big guy downstairs, that he needs to be in the exclusive club in hell. It's a very odd premise, and I was excited to see where it goes, and we do get a fun little man in red, I should say, that just choose every scene he's in. He's absolutely fantastic. But the story just kind of fizzles. It doesn't really end. It just kind of fizzles out. And there's this element dealing with this woman who's scorned by this man, too, that's very predictable. But nonetheless, it was still an entertaining episode. It just didn't go where I was hoping it would. I was kind of disappointed with it. But, yeah, like the others, I had a fun enough time. At number 10, we have episode 53 overall, The Geisenstacks. This was a story by Frederick Brown. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now, I know that this is a more popular Tales from the Darkside episode, and trust me, I enjoyed this episode a lot, but there's another story from Creepshow that came out years later. I think it's called The House of the Head, that did a similar idea to this, but I like that way more than this. This is more goosebumpsy in nature, which I kind of like. This feels like something R.L. Stine would write. It's about this girl. She's given this dollhouse with these creepy dolls from her uncle, who found this dollhouse as the only thing remaining inside of this other house, right? I guess he works realty or something. And the girl starts playing with these dolls, and things that she says and talks with them about come true. And the parents start witnessing this, and the dad specifically gets freaked out and thinks that these dolls might be, emulating them and their souls. And the story goes down the predictable route, unfortunately, and it ends up in a twist that kind of harkens back to what the uncle said in the beginning of the episode, which isn't the worst thing ever. I think it was going for those Russian dolls that, you open up a doll, there's a doll inside, open up a doll, it's a doll inside kind of thing. I can see what it's going for artistically, but it just didn't have any X factor to it. It was just a little too predictable for my taste. But I will say this. The fucking Geisenstacks dolls are scary as shit, okay? It's one of those mind-bending stories that actually work well on the show. Hats off to them for that. Just could have been better, in my opinion. Some people might hate me for saying that, but it is in my top 10. So at least work with me here. Alright, next up at number 9, we have episode 60, Miss Medusa. This was a story by Richard Blackburn. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5 stars. This one's a classic retelling of the Medusa fable from ancient Greek lore. Really, the setup to it is what I really enjoy about it. This mannequin is inside of this, warehouse type of place, and this burglar tries to come in one night to ransack the place. But he makes eye contact with this mannequin, which turns him into a mannequin, and this mannequin woman comes to life. And she has amnesia, she can't remember who she is, and she goes wandering around the streets, and she ends up meeting this musician who happens to be blind, and they fall in love, and she realizes that the only way they can move on and, be together is if they go back, and she has to handle something first. But what ends up happening is she goes back to where she was before, and something happens, and it's kind of fucked up the way the story ends. It might piss people off, if I'm being honest. It's one of those episodes that actually hook you emotionally with the characters. There's some good characterizing moments. They have good quirks to them, great acting. My biggest issue with the episode is that I wish the story was a little bit darker. It seemed a little bit too copacetic for me. Not really horror, but there are some chilling aspects to it. I think the mannequin shakeup was a fun idea. The memory loss angle, kind of convenient with how that wraps up, but I wish that was played a little bit better. But other than that, still a good episode, and I like it a lot more than the other goods in some ways. That's why I put it this high. Alright, at number 8, we have episode 69, Let the Games Begin. This was a story by Peter O'Keefe, and I also gave this 3.75 out of 5. This was a fucking fun episode. Those old, cartoons of angels and demons on people's shoulder. This is pretty much that, but told in such a unique and fun way. This man who has a heart condition, maybe a drug and alcohol problem too, arrives at this hotel, and he unfortunately croaks. And while he's dead, this angel and demon messenger from heaven and hell are arguing and bickering over who gets to take him where, and they both have evidence that he's a good person and a bad person. So they take on the personas of people that he knew in his life, like his best friend and I think his brother's ex-wife that he once had a crush on or something. And they both try to bring him back to life in their own ways to see which side he ends up falling on. And the stipulation is whoever can get the man out of the room first gets to take him to either heaven or hell. And the story goes a complete 180 near the end, which is really fun, where you see these two messengers maybe start to hit it off. The ending, though, I'm not going to spoil it. I was hoping for a little more dark zest to the story, but for a little slice of life kind of feeling story, ironically, even though there's supernatural elements to it, there's not a lot to this episode. It's very claustrophobic. It takes place in like one location the entire time, but the acting performances here are some of the best in the whole show. A lot of scene chewing moments. It's just fun to watch these characters banter. I just wish there was more to it, essentially. But yeah, I had a fun time. At number 7, this was episode 68, The Swap. This was a story by Richard Benner. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars as well. This episode is so goddamn bizarre. I don't even know how to explain it, but it was so much fun. This man who has a lot of just grotesque physical attributes, like he has a hunchback, he has warts all over his face. He has a wife who pretty much is two-timing him in front of his face to this younger man. And the younger man and the wife are trying to find ways to kill this man. And the guy, the hunchback guy, he's experimenting around with like poisons and stuff. He's not really the most saintly person ever. And he's kind of sicko, I should say. And the actor who plays him is fucking awesome, alright? But let's just say the couple tries to do something to the man one night in a really fucked up fashion, but it ends up backfiring on the woman, specifically. Once her husband may be dealt with and she has to see what becomes of her new man. Let's just say that. This was just a fun episode. I like the setting. It's set in like a bayou type of location. It's a lot of scene chewing moments with the main actor who's like the hunchback guy. But very predictable story. I think it's too predictable for its own good. Not really all that clever. I think the body horror could have been a whole lot better than what we got. It was still kind of gross. A little mildly too gross out. But I think they could have accentuated some of the aesthetics here to kind of pop it up into the very good. But I had a fun time with this episode. And at number 6, to round off the good, we have episode 59, Seasons of Belief. This was a story by Michael Bishop. And I gave it this story as well a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I know some people want to just like punch me through the screen right now, saying that Seasons of Belief is one of the best Tales from the Darkside episodes. I can agree with that. It would be in my maybe top 20. But to me, there's a lot of disbelief you got to put at the door with this episode. You know what I mean? Like a lot of plot convenience going on with the story. Logic issues. But nonetheless, it's a fun little story. Had some great acting to it. He's two, I guess, grandparents are watching their grandkids, and the granddad likes to fuck with them, and he tells them this story about this Christmas monster that through specific things that you do on Christmas Eve will bring the monster to life, and let's just say it may or may not happen. It's a memorable episode, don't get me wrong. It's very fun. If that was a kid, I would have been fucking creeped out by this. Might have had nightmares. But where the story was building, I think it should have had more X factor than what we have. And also, the ending, I can live without. With that being said, though, still a good episode. It's on the top end of good. It's definitely a classic. I'll probably watch this every Christmas season. It might have some opportunity to go up in the future. But as of now, I'll leave it up to my number 6 for this season. Now, my top 5 of season 3. This is where we're entering the very good to great. territory. At number 5, my 5th favorite, is episode 57. This was an episode called Baker's Dozen, and it was based on a story by Scott Edelman. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This story was just so much fun. It was set in New Orleans, and there's just so much to commend about, like, the acting performances here, and the premise idea was so fun and kind of hokey, but in a good way. You know what I mean? This man who's like an advertising mogul wants to convince this woman who owns a cookie shop to, join his hype train. And she is a very bizarre woman. And this man who works for her, who we later find out is her dad, is petrified of her. And he's telling the man, you do not want to work with her. But the man's like, you know what? Whatever. And the old man's like, here, I'll do you a favor. I'll give you a baker's dozen of these gingerbread cookies that she made. You can't tell her that I gave you these, though. And you'll find out what kind of power you're dealing with this woman. And as the episode goes on, the man realizes the power of the gingerbread cookies, but he also has to deal with this woman who may or may not be going behind his back, sabotaging him. And the story wraps up in a poetic way, I should say. And people get their just desserts. It's very much in tune of the Creep Show series. I don't think they would ever do something this hokey, though. But it has a lot of Creep Show in its veins. Not the most like Creep Show, but there's some Creep Show elements to it. It's kind of like a hybrid of a Darkside and Darkside story and a Creep Show story. And that's, I guess, why I put it this high. But I had a fun time with it. At number 4, we have episode 52, Florence Bravo. This was a story by Edith Swenson. I think this was my favorite story of hers this season. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars as well. This was a fucking scary episode. I have not found a few episodes that I've been scared of, but this one had this psychological thing. It had a good enough message going for it about trusting people and toxic relationships, and it was kind of making a statement about should couples that have history of adultery problems stay together. It serves a powerful punch, but essentially this man and his wife have moved into this fixer-upper home. The man's a professor, and he has a lot, he's working with young women a lot, and unfortunately he had a fling with a younger woman in the past that scarred his wife, and she had to go on medication for a while, and she stopped taking her medication, and the man's like, well, you should probably get back on it, and we'll slowly wean you off after a certain amount of time. But while living in the house, there's some odd things going on, right? And the house may or may not have a history to this woman who murdered her adulterous husband. And this might be affecting the woman's psyche because she's a stay-at-home woman. And she's not, I think she's looking for a job or something, but, she can't really escape her mental health issues. And slowly but surely, some bizarre shit starts happening. Let's just say that. There's some visions and shit that are kind of actually pretty well done, like movie quality. It's very fucking tense. Even though, as you'll see, I'm not going to spoil anything. Somebody really just didn't do anything wrong in the episode. They end up getting something terrible done to them. But, it is what it is. I think you'll see what the message is saying. I think my biggest issue with it is kind of like the botched moral element to it. It's kind of botched, if you ask me, but still, very good episode. And the top of the very good, as my number 3 overall, we have episode 65, Everybody Needs a Little Love. This was a story by Robert Bloch. This was the first Robert Bloch story since season 1. And this also got a 4 out of 5 stars. This story is pretty much framed like Gin No Chaser from season 1 and like a commentary style, but this is so goddamn creepy. It's another one of these living doll stories, but the concept here is very bizarre. There's like this noir crime element to it also. There's like this, it's set in the past element as well. So the setting, the style of the episode, the acting, when you got Robert Bloch writing a story, you're probably going to get something at least good here. It's not the scariest thing ever, But essentially the premise is that this man, he may or may not have had a mental breakdown and is now toting around this mannequin that he's treating like his wife or like serious girlfriend that lives with him. And the main character is pretty much talking to somebody the whole episode, but we don't know who he's talking to. And you learn what this man has witnessed, at least involving the guy who is parading this mannequin woman around as his wife. And there's this like, is she real or not real element? And then the ending kind of muffles it up for me. It gets very confusing. It goes down around, I was seeing it going. It's mildly predictable, but the twist in there is very vague and it's not concrete, and it just does not send the episode home on a coherent note. Unfortunately, that's why I put it here. But I did give this episode, a very, reasonable score. I had a lot of fun with this. I don't know if the original version, I think this was actually adapted from a short story from him, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that original version had a better ending. I might have to go read that because I'm curious here. All right. At my top 2, we have 2 great episodes from this season. And at number 2, we have episode 62, My Ghost Rider, the Vampire. This was a story by Scott Edelman, and I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Now, this, to my knowledge, is the only episode in Tales from the Darkside that was based on a comic book story. And the comic book story was released in DC Comics' Unexpected series. And I actually went out and bought this comic when I discovered this. It's issue 197, and it's, the same story here. My Ghost Rider the Vampire is actually the cover of the issue. And I don't want to glare on the video, but yeah, that's the comic here. So I was intrigued, and after I watched the episode, I went to read the comic, and both of these have their own strengths. I do prefer the episode more, but the comic is still good. So if you want to go out and buy that, go right ahead. But the story is essentially a really good, shake-up to the vampire mythology here. So this writer, he's kind of like a hack writer, not really talented or creative or anything. Doesn't have any original ideas. He gets visited one night by this vampire who makes a proposition with him. He will tell him 900 years worth of vampire stories that he can use and write novels for and pretty much make a lot of money off of, because there's a lot of stuff that he's been holding for all these years that people just don't know about vampires. And in exchange, he gets to live in his apartment. So the man agrees, and he has this kind of friend, kind of rival chick with an accent to her. I think she's like British or Australian. And she's also a writer. And she may or may not play in the end of the story. But essentially the man starts getting success, and he thinks that he can double-cross the vampire. And the way that's handled, there's a lot of cool mythology changes in here that I've never seen done before. Like vampires can turn to ash, but get resurrected from the ash if you drop tears of a woman or blood on it. And also, pure silver with serrated endings can turn vampires like pretty much gray and like blood pulsating in their face. That was pretty well done. There's a climax scene with some good practical effects. And the twist I actually like in the story as well. My only issue with the story, honestly, is how campy it is. It's a vampire story, and the guy who dresses like a vampire is not really fucking scary. It's kind of corny. I should say that too. It's kind of corny. But aside from that tone issue, this is a fun episode. And I actually gave this the Most Like Creepshow award for this season. This would have worked kind of well in a Creepshow setting, like in like a hypothetical Creepshow movie, if they were to pick and choose ideas from Tales from the Darkside and make like a Creepshow 3 or whatever legacy film. This is a good story to do so with. I had a blast with this, and it kind of pains me to put it as my number 2, but my number 1 definitely deserves it. I think my number 1 is actually my new favorite episode of the show thus far. We'll see by the end of season 4 if it stands. But the last episode to talk about is my number one from this season. It's episode 49, The Circus. This was a story adapted from writer Sidney Bounds. I think Romero did the teleplay here. I forgot who directed it. Might have been, was it Michael Gornick or something? I forget, don't quote me. I'm not really good with that on the top of my head. But I gave this story a 4.75 out of 5. The only other episode to have this score was Inside the Closet from season 1. This story was just so much fun. There's such a great atmosphere to this story. There's a lot of morals being thrown at you. Ethics. There's ethical questions. It has also the distinction of being a creep show like story. I would say this, My Ghost Rider, The Vampire, Baker's Dozen, Florence Bravo, all of these have some creepshow elements, but The Circus is probably my second, nominee from this season behind Ghost Rider, because this is just so beautifully executed. Right? This man, he's like a reporter. He's like a skeptic reporter. He hears this news about this carnival that has these sideshow freak attractions that promote to kids and stuff, and he goes and talks to this showrunner, and the showrunner starts showing him actual monsters that are displayed on the circus banners and stuff, and the man throughout the episode gets growingly convinced, and he gets so convinced that he actually may or may not become part of the show itself. It's almost perfect. It's an almost perfect story from the directing, from the music in the episode, the tone and the vibe to it just all match perfectly. The makeup effects are some of the best makeup effects in the whole show. My only issue is that there are some things that are just too hunky-dory, and especially dealing with some monsters, like the Frankenstein bit. That shit was just hella corny. I'm just throwing it out there. There are some mild corny bits to it that hold it back, for me. Like, I actually kind of cringed in one particular scene dealing with the Frankenstein knockoff, unfortunately. But I love this. I love this episode so much. I might be generous and bump this up to a 5 out of 5. We'll see after season 4. But yeah, this was a fantastic episode. But yeah, that's essentially my season 3 ranking and review of Tales from the Darkside season 3. Let me know down in the comment section, what was your favorite episode? What was your least favorite episode of this season? How would you go about ranking these? Are there any takes that you don't agree with from me? Are there some that you do agree with? Let me know down in the comment section, and I'll see you next time.